Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm posting part 2. This is the Betty Broderick trial, the archived videos. This is just a continuance from the last video, and then it's going into like another court day. Like they're talking about the child custody, support and alimony, and then they're getting into more of the harassing phone calls, which the prosecutor, Miss Wells, she played these tapes a lot during the trial, and it just showed how vindictive and selfish and really crazy Betty Broderick was during this time. We'll see Betty cry, and unfortunately it's not because she has any remorse or she feels bad that her kids are now orphans. She basically cries when Miss Wells brings up the destruction and vandalism that Betty caused to Dan's home. And this is the home that Dan had bought after him and Betty separated. They had a family home together, and then something was wrong with the foundation, so they had to move out and they were in a rental. Well, Dan ended up separating from Betty while in the rental, and he went back to the home, I believe it was called Coral Reef, the Coral Reef home. He went back there while, construction was ongoing. And then he eventually bought like a mansion in Balboa Park, an area in New York. And so that's the house where Betty drove her car into, and they'll also discuss that in these videos. She says that she didn't, I'm trying to think of the word. She didn't, necessarily think that was vandalism. But I have a little picture of the home. I couldn't find the damage that she did, but you can see where they had to repair like part of the brick wall because it was like a brick house. And then I added, so it's a video of them selling that house. And they show a picture of like the damage after it was repaired. So let me know what you think, and I'll get a part 3 out here. Those of you that are enjoying this kind of commentary, stay tuned, because I'm also going to cover the Sarah Boone trial, and she's the woman that zipped her boyfriend up in a suitcase, and he unfortunately died while in there. In her court trial is about to start, so I'm going to cover that as well. So enjoy. Let me know what you think. Bye.
Do you see anything in there that he wants to come to a conclusion about the children or the money or anything with me? No. He is in total control of everything. And that is a letter to me saying that it's now my responsibility to make sure that the children don't hear naughty names from me, and that the children are happy about this. And putting all that responsibility on me at that point.
Okay.
I would have expected a letter at that point of, we're finally divorced, let's make some sort of a settlement, let's get on with our lives. That's what I wanted in a letter at that point.
And you don't think that's what he was saying in this?
I know that's not what he's saying.
It would have been better for him to say, we are finally divorced, instead of, you and I are no longer married? Is there a difference in that?
No, that letter doesn't say, let's make an attempt to settle this at all. It doesn't mention that at all. It just says,
henceforth, I will do anything I can on this score for the kids' sake, and I hope you will do the same. He's talking about the kids, not the divorce, the kids, right?
what does that mean? Henceforth, he will do anything. He wouldn't speak to me. He wouldn't let me see them. He wouldn't let me talk on the phone to him. Henceforth, I will do anything. He wouldn't do anything.
Are you saying in July of 1986 you weren't seeing the kids?
I always saw the kids. He'd have to kill me to keep me away from those kids.
Back to when the Knox Attorney Service tried to serve you with an order. You wouldn't receive the order. You wouldn't open up the door. You did call up Dan Broderick. You threatened him. You told him to get them away, or that you'd kill the kids, kill him, burn the houses down. Correct?
That's what he says. I said, I know I was scared to death and absolutely hysterical, and I wanted him to call off the dogs.
Well, you have threatened before to kill Dan and the kids.
I've never threatened to kill the kids. I know he says that, but I've never threatened ever to kill the kids.
Do you remember when you were at Claremont Hospital after driving the car through the door? Patient readily admits that she had threatened to kill her husband, children, and self in the past. Did you readily admit that you had done that at Claremont Hospital?
I said I probably, have said things like that. But when particularly asked, I've never threatened the children at all, ever.
Well, when you say I would have probably said that,
Well,
but
I
when
almost agreed to it when you
asked-
just said it. I said a lot of things when I was mad and stuff, not meaning any of them. But
Okay.
I don't
So-
think I ever threatened the children.
And you were mad when the Knox Attorney Service was attempting to serve you with a contempt order, and so it is possible that you told Dan that you were going to kill the kids, you were going to kill him, you were going to burn the house down.
I was not mad. I was terrified. I was scared. I was alone. I had no way to defend myself against him. I was not mad. I was scared.
This was a process server who was knocking on the door to serve you with a piece of paper, right?
Right.
Okay. And Dan Broderick did call the process server up, didn't he? He called him, he got in touch with him, and he told him not to do it.
Yes, he did.
And the vandalism continued. The restraining order didn't work, the asking you not to do it didn't work, the attempting to serve you
Where are
with
you
a
now?
contempt order.
Where are you?
After January of 1986. In February of 1986, that's when you went over and drove the car through the front door, correct?
Okay.
And that's when you tried to go over to Coral Reef and burn the house down and smash the sliding glass door, correct?
I'm
In
totally
February of
confused.
86?
Totally confused. But that letter was just July of '86, so now we're going backwards?
When the Knox Attorney Service attempted to serve you, it was January of 1986.
Okay. So
Okay.
from there, okay.
And he wasn't able to serve you with any papers, he wasn't able to serve you with any attempted contempt action to go to court, and the vandalism did continue. Yes?
Is now the knocking into his door what you're referring to as the vandalism?
Yes?
Well, I don't consider that vandalism.
Okay.
And that's a different house, and they had moved, and no, the vandalism as such in Coral Reef did not continue. They moved out.
They're now in Cyprus, and the
Yes.
driving through to the front door was at Cyprus, correct?
Yes.
And in January of 1986, when we were talking about, they were already in Cyprus, living in Cyprus.
I think so. Sometime in January '86.
And you did continue, or you began at that point, leaving the messages on his machine. That's when he put the message machine, answering machine at his house, correct?
Probably.
It was, again, that summer that you complained that Dan sent the children to camp, correct?
Yep. You're doing a great job of reminding me about all of this stuff. Because I was absolutely, as we get it in order and it all comes back the way it was, yeah, he moved to Cyprus. And yeah, he put the telephone machine on so I couldn't reach my kids. And yeah, he had the restraining order. But he wasn't doing anything to make peace or get an agreement or to see that I saw the kids at all.
Okay.
So, you're trying to...
Excuse me, Mrs. Broderick, thank you. You've answered the question. Well, perhaps it'd be appropriate to take a break, Your Honor, so the witness can compose herself.
Do you want a break, Ms. Broderick?
No, I'm fine.
Could you please help you? Ms. Broderick?
I have something,
Okay,
thank you.
okay. She just says she doesn't need a break. Go ahead.
It was after you drove the car through the front door when Kim and Lee were home, and it was after you began leaving the messages on the answering machine in 1986 when the psychologist again recommended that the children perhaps would be better off if they got out of town, correct?
How would I know any of that? No psychologist ever spoke to me.
Are you saying Dr. Sparta never spoke to you?
Not that
Your
I can
Honor,
recall.
I have an objection as to the form of the question.
Sustained. Let's rephrase it.
You never had any conversations with Dr. Sparta about the children?
I called him a few times to meet with him and talk with him, but I don't remember that no, I never met him. I never saw him.
Okay.
And we may have had a conversation on the phone that I initiated because I wanted to talk to him, but I don't remember that he recommended those sorts of things to me.
Isn't it true that Dr. Sparta specifically called you because he wanted to get your input, he wanted to get your help with doing something for these kids, and you refused.
I don't remember that, no, because it was my feeling that I wanted to get involved with Dan and with the children in therapy, always.
Do you recall Dr. Jacobson trying to get you and Dan involved with therapy with the kids and you refusing?
Dr. Jacobson definitely tried to get Dan involved in therapy years before, and Dan would not come in.
I'm talking about in 1985.
No, I wouldn't have refused that. I mean, I don't remember that he recommended that. I don't remember that he ever called Dan. I don't remember that ever happening.
And you're saying that you don't remember Dr. Sparta ever calling you and trying to get you involved, and all you wanted to do with Dr. Sparta was tell him how awful you thought Dan Broderick was.
I don't remember him ever offering me to come speak to him. I wanted to come speak to him, but I was very wary of Dan's expert witnesses being hired for the adversarial legal system and not for straight-out innocuous therapy.
And that's what you're saying he did with Dr. Sparta when he hired Dr. Sparta before
Yes.
the divorce? That he
Yes.
was hiring him for to be an adverse witness?
Yes, because he was referred to Dr. Sparta by his divorce attorney, and that's the way divorce attorneys work.
To
Yes.
get help for the kids?
No.
Okay, well, if you never talked to Dr. Sparta, how do you know what he was hired for and what he was trying to do on behalf of your children?
Because I've been in the system long enough to know how it works now, that lawyers have particular psychologists and experts that they hire when they want that expert to say a certain thing. Dan had sole custody of the kids. He wanted to keep sole custody of the kids, and Dr. Sparta was hired to make sure that that happened.
In 1985, Dan had sole custody of the kids because you had given him custody of the kids. He had taken the kids to Dr. Sparta to get help.
I never gave Dan sole custody of the children. I put the children, as we've testified, back at Coral Reef when Dan took the rental roof away from us and told us we'd have no home. The children went back to Coral Reef. Then he sent them away for the summer, and then when they came back from the summer is when the real trouble started, where he had restraining orders to keep me away from the kids in the house. I never gave Dan custody of the children, but I didn't have a house or monthly income to take them with me, ever. And after what Dan did in February of '85, cutting us off without a house or any income, I didn't think he wouldn't do it again. I thought he would do it again.
It wasn't until September, October, November of '86, after living through this of 18 months worth of the vandalism, of the obscene phone calls, of attempting to get a restraining order, of attempting to get you served with a contempt because you weren't following the restraining order. It was at that point that he withheld some money from the voluntary support, correct?
Where are you?
September, October, November of
86.
1986.
There was no vandalism ever in the Cypress house, except for the day that he sold the house and I bumped the car into his front door. There was never any claims of vandalism there again.
Them. And before that, the bitter ex-wife rammed her car right through the front of the Marston Hills home.
Right here you can see there's this discoloration, which is still a repair job from when Betty rammed her car in here.
If you could just look at this letter for me and identify it as the letter that you've been referring to where there was a negative balance of $1,300.
Yes.
And it is true that even though he was attempting to get you to stop the vulgar words that you were using with the kids, that he did pay for your mortgage that month, that he did pay for your gasoline bill that month, that he did pay a $430 bill at the Polo store, and that he also did send you your Campstead check for $2,300, correct?
So what?
Well, it wasn't really a negative $1,300, was it? He didn't send you negative money. He didn't tell you you owed him $1,300. In fact, he paid your mortgage bill, he paid your gas bill,
No.
and he sent you a check for $2,300.
Absolutely
Your
wrong.
Honor, and I would object to assumes facts, not in evidence.
Well, overruled. I assume that's what's indicated in the letter, Exhibit
Not
78.
only was that minus,
Excuse me.
Is that what's
There's no
indicated in Table
question.
78?
That's Exhibit 78, yes.
Your Honor, it says that she owes, it's minus $1,300.
The letter speaks for itself.
Best evidence for the letter is what the letter says.
And you also received a check from Dan Broderick for $10,000 in November of 1986 so that you could cover expenses.
Was that the advance on community that Mr. Hargreaves got?
Yes?
Well, that's my money that he's sending me as an advance on community. It wasn't a support payment. So it was my money that he forwarded to me.
There was a stipulation that Mr. Hargreaves got for you because you were claiming you didn't have enough money in November of 1986, so that Dan Broderick would pay you $10,000, correct?
And another 10 to Mr. Hargreaves of community property, right. I believe that's at the same time.
Your Honor, may I have marked as People's Exhibit 79 a stipulation in order?
So, Mark.
If you could simply identify that, is that a stipulation for you to receive $10,000 in November of 1986?
I think so, yeah.
There was also another stipulation that Mr. Hargreaves got for you, for Dan Broderick to send you $4,300, $2,000 towards the Christmas trip, another $2,300, as well as $10,000 for Mr. Hargreaves' attorney's fees, correct?
I don't know what happened with that. That was very confusing, but I don't think I got that money, and we didn't go on the Christmas trip.
Well, you got the $10,000 in November of 1986, didn't you?
Yes, that was my money, that he was finally, of all the community, he was going to let.
From September to December of 1986.
So, Mark.
If we could just go through these checks, Mrs. Broderick, and if you could identify them as checks that you wrote on your account. The first one dated September 3rd, 1986. Is that a check for $1,000 to Saks Fifth Avenue?
A charge payment, yes.
September 2nd, 1986. Is that a check for $511 to Bullock's?
Yes.
September 2nd, 1986. Is this a check for $1,000 to Home Federal on your MasterCard?
Right.
September 3rd, 1986, a check for $1,000 on Great American MasterCard?
Right.
October 2nd, 1986, a check for $1,199 to Saks Fifth Avenue?
Right.
October 2nd, 1986, a check for $500 to Great American on your MasterCard?
Right. These are all charge payments.
October 5th, 1986, a check for $200 to Home Federal?
Right.
November 6th, 1986, a check for $500 to Nordstrom's?
Right.
November 6th, 1986, a check for $700 to iMagnum?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
November 6th, 1986, a check for $2,000 to Saks Fifth Avenue?
Yes.
November 6th, 1986, a check for $1,000 to Great American?
Mm-hmm.
November 6th, 1986, another $1,000 to Home Federal?
Yes. I'm sorry.
November 25th, 1986, a check for $561.80 to CG Boutique?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
December 1st, 1986, a check for $500 to Nordstrom?
Yes.
December 1st, 1986, a check for $1,000 to iMagnum?
Yes.
December 1st, 1986, a check for $1,500 to Saks?
Yes. Angry, and I felt harassed first because I was interrupted in reaching my children, and out of frustration, I would say ugly things that ended up harassing him. But I had much more important things to do than to pick up the phone and bother harassing him.
You just said it again. I never picked up the phone to call Dan Broderick. I only called to talk to my children.
Right. But if I got the machine, I'd talk to Dan.
This is a message to You have one hell of a nerve dumping the kids here on the sidewalk and zooming away without making any attempt to communicate with me about my plans for the weekend. Make me sick, the both of you. I have a good mind to dump the kids back on yours and drive away. Call me, we have a lot to talk about, asshole. And come pick up your 4 children that you're working so hard to have custody of. Congratulations, you can have them.
You obviously were not calling Dan Broderick's house to get in touch with the children on that phone call, were you?
The children were at my house.
So you did not just pick up the phone to call the children. You were picking up the phone to call and leave a message with Dan Broderick, weren't you?
I wasn't calling to harass him. I had real, hardcore, tangible business to take care of with that. It wasn't a
Mrs.
harass
Broderick,
call.
You said, I never picked up the phone to call Dan.
To harass
That's
Dan.
not true.
Oh, sorry.
Is it?
I meant I never picked up a phone call to harass Dan Broderick. That is a phone call that I needed to talk to Dan Broderick. But I didn't pick up the phone to harass Dan Broderick.
Okay, come get
I
the
called
kids.
to reach
I
him.
want to get rid of them, but I don't like driving to your... Hurry up, come get them.
That again was not a phone conversation or a message that you left that had anything to do with the kids, did it? You
They're
picked up the
within-
phone to call Dan.
Within moments of one another on the same day, on the same weekend where I was supposed to go to work and I was half dressed and the 4 kids are on my front lawn and Dan went with Linda to the Ritz-Carlton, but we didn't know that, so
Did
he
you-
wasn't home.
Did you pick up the phone to call Dan?
To call Dan, not to harass Dan, to call Dan, to get in touch with him.
Come get the kids. Stop long enough to return my call. I left messages on the machine, with the maid, with the secretary, etc., etc. I have very important things to ask you. You're making me mad. I'll kill you.
Now, that message had nothing to do with the kids, and it had nothing to do with the kids being at your house, did it?
No.
You were calling him, you said, stop long enough to return my messages. I have very important
Right.
things to talk to you. You were calling specifically to talk to Dan Broderick, weren't you?
Right, not to harass him. I had to reach him about specific things.
You
And I
knew-
couldn't reach him at the office, and I couldn't reach him somewhere else, or he wouldn't return my calls. So I called, I guess that's that machine.
You knew that saying things like stop was harassing. You knew that that made Dan Broderick angry. You knew that it was inappropriate.
This is, I don't know when it is, in late '87, but I hardly cared what made Dan Broderick angry at that point.
Did you think, when you left the message, stop long enough to return my calls, did you think that somebody who heard that would be real inclined to want to return your calls?
I wasn't real inclined to talk to him either in late '87, but
Well,
I was
was that
having
designed
problems
to
with my
get him
house
to-
payment, the insurance, and things that I had no control over because they were in his
Excuse me, Your
name.
Honor, may I
Just,
have the witness instructed to please respond to my question?
just go ahead.
Did you think that when you left that message, stop long enough to return my calls, that that was going to make him inclined to want to return your calls?
I wasn't
Yes or
inclined to
no?
want to talk to him either, no.
Well, you called and left the message.
I didn't want to
You
have
wanted-
anything to do with Dan Broderick in 1987. I didn't want to talk to him either. He had me between a rock and a hard place, and he knew it, and I had to deal with him on certain things because he made it that way, and then he refused to deal with me. And then I'd
Did
get
you leave that
hysterical.
message, Mrs. Broderick, yes or no?
Yes,
And did you say stop long enough to return my messages, yes or no?
yes.
And did you think that he was going to be inclined to want to call you back when you left that message,
No.
yes or no?
No.
I have the day off and I would really like to use the boat, my boat. How do I get the keys? Where are the keys? Will you make another set and deliver them over here so that when I want to use the boat I can use it? Thanks, sweetie.
Did that conversation or that message have anything to do with the children or getting in touch with the children, yes or no?
I would have only used the boat with the children, but not particularly on that phone message.
Your Honor, may I have marked as another tape? People's Exhibit next to order.
84.
Really told me you're afraid of me. You better damn well be afraid of me. You keep pulling like this. Better pay this insurance bill now, or you're going to be damn afraid of me.
Did that message have anything to do with talking to the children or wanting to talk to the children?
No, it had to do with desperation of having to deal with him.
You didn't have any problems, obviously, asserting yourself when you were angry about something. You called him up and you demanded that he did something, or you were going to do something to him, correct?
He never did anything that I demanded. He was just empty threats.
You had specifically been advised, whether you agreed with it or not, by the judge when you went through the contempt hearings, that that conduct was harassing. Using that language was harassing, correct? You had specifically, whether you agreed with it or not, by the judge when you went through the contempt hearings, that that conduct was harassing. Using that language was harassing, correct?
Yes, and I disagreed.
In fact, the judge had talked to you about the fact that not only was it harassing and disturbing the peace of everyone in the household, but that it was obviously not good for the children to be exposed to those kinds of characterizations, correct?
I don't know if that's what the judge said, but I considered the phone answering machine and leaving me cut out of everything with no recourse was annoying, harassing, and bothering me, more than me yelling back at him was annoying, harassing, and bothering him.
It was explained to you, though, in no uncertain terms by the judge, who said directly to you, Mrs. Broderick, who is an obviously intelligent person, and who, so far as I know, functions mentally in the way that other people do.
Your Honor, I'm going to object.
Sustained.
He told you that you were clearly engaged in a pattern of conduct that was harassing, and that it had to stop, correct?
And I told that judge he could sentence me to 21 years in jail and I would not stop trying to get in touch with my children, that he had
And
no
there
right to
was
cut me off from my children.
nothing that you were ever held in contempt for trying to get in touch with your children.
Wrong.
It was for using the language that you used, correct?
It was for using the language that I used when I hit the machines that were put there for the sole and explicit purpose of keeping me from my children, which drove me crazy, guaranteed every time.
Okay. And if you knew that it was going to drive you crazy, guaranteed every time, you obviously had the ability to recognize it was going to be there and to not use that language, correct? But you did it anyway.
I wanted to get in touch with my children. I was not putting up with that.
Well, we've just listened to several messages where it's clear you didn't want to get in touch with your children. You wanted to get in touch with Dan Broderick. You wanted to make demands, and you used that kind of language.
But
and
those
you weren't out of control in those messages, were you?
I was pretty upset in those messages.
You also left those messages when it was clear that Linda Cocaina's voice was not on the machine, didn't you?
No.
Did you not leave a message on June 21st, 1987, where it starts off, "My God, did you say Kathy Lee? I'm so glad that you're using that name, it's cute." Anyway, this is a message for the... She's such a... Well, that's the only word I can think of. There's nothing lower. It's clear that it was Kathy Lee's voice that was on the machine when you made that message, correct?
Sounds like it, that one.
So it didn't have anything to do with Linda's voice being on the machine that made you leave that kind of a message, did it?
What kind of a message? What's the rest of that message? Is that a message
This
to
is
leave?
a message for the...
And that's the end of it?
My God, did you say Kathy Lee? I'm so glad you're using that name. It's cute. Anyway, this is a message for
Okay, that's it for today's part 2 of the Betty Broderick trial. Stay tuned. I think part 3, I might add in some of the witnesses that were either character witnesses or witnesses to Betty's horrible actions towards her children, Dan and Linda. Let me know what you think. You guys have a great night. Bye.